Welcome to the best Tombstone, where I am going to be building a character for the purposes of playtesting some of the new Psion class material released at the end of May by Wizards of the Coast in an Unearthed Arcana, using the 5th edition rules of Dungeons and Dragons in conjunction with the 2nd edition of the Mythic Game Master emulator. According to the PDF, Psions are spellcasters who use innate mental powers to gain extraordinary abilities and unleash the magic of their minds. Psions trace their history back to the appendix of the 1st edition of the Player's Handbook, and a psionicist class first appeared in Steve Winter's 1991 Complete Psionics Handbook. Psionics have taken numerous forms in D&D, from alternative magic systems to options that dovetail with other D&D rules. In the 5th edition, psychic power is synonymous with the magic of the mind and flavors numerous spells, monsters, and subclasses like the Psi Warrior Fighter, the Soul Knife Rogue, and the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. This iteration of the Psion class includes psionic energy dice and psionic spellcasting features that set it apart from its spellcasting peers. I'm going to start by rolling 2d8 for my character's creature type. And that's a 4 and a 7 for an 11, which would in any other world be a dragonborn, who walk proudly through a world that greets them with fearful incomprehension. Shaped by draconic gods or the dragons themselves, dragonborns originally hatched from dragon eggs as a unique race, combining the best attributes of dragons and humanoids. Some dragonborns are faithful servants to true dragons, others form the ranks of soldiers in great wars, and still others find themselves adrift with no clear calling in life. In the world in which I will be playing this character, however, dragonborns are instead known as Derkomaian, which is a Proto-Hellenic term meaning to see clearly. Next, I'll roll a percentile to reveal the character's sex. And that is the first time that I have ever rolled a 1 on this detail, so this character is intersex. Does this character identify as male? On a 21, he does. And I'm also going to make another roll here to reveal something else. And that's a 64, which is for me to know and for you to find out. Maybe, if it ever becomes substantially relevant to the story. We already know that this character is a scion, and there are 4 pre-official subclasses to choose from. But rather than roll for that, I am going to make him a psykineticist, who control their psionic powers like a malleable force. They bend their telekinetic energies into sturdy barriers and strike with the force of a battering ram. Because I know almost nothing about this character, I am going to make a few more rolls here to get a better sense of who he is, and I'm going to start with a name. That's a 77, which is SHA, and a 29, which is ET. Other than the title character of Steven Spielberg's 1982 sci-fi film, the first thing that ET makes me think of is Ethon, Ethon, which is one of the English spellings for the name of the eagle that ate the liver of Prometheus while he was chained to the stone. And SHA makes me think of Sharma, a Hindu surname that means safety or happiness. So we've got Ethon, the Derkomaian Psykinetic Psion, whose identity is 41, which is a healer, and a 55, which is a leader, which sounds exactly like what a cleric would be. So I think this character is essentially the leader of a new school philosophy of healing that asserts that spellcasters don't need to rely on deities to use curative magic. His background is 73, which is poor, and a 62, which is injury. So he grew up in poverty and saw a number of people he cared about suffer from injuries, wounds, and diseases because they couldn't afford the expense of getting them healed. And he likely taught himself healing magic as a way to help his community. Which also means that I'm building a character who is both a victim of and a product of a woefully inadequate healthcare system. A couple of his skills are going to be 61 and a 44, which are mental and health, which aligns with both the mental nature of his psionic abilities and his identity as a healer. And it tells me that this character is absolutely going to be the group therapist of whatever party he winds up working with. A couple of his traits are 29, which is environment, and a 2, which is adversity, which affirms the fact that his focus on healing emerged from the socioeconomic adversity of the environment he grew up in. I'm also going to roll to discover his personality here, which is 22, which is collector, which aligns with his draconic nature as someone who keeps a hoard, and an 89, which is social, which makes sense as someone who seeks out the underserved sectors of society to provide them with at least one of the resources they lack, that being magical healing. And I imagine that part of being a social collector also involves building a network of other specialists that he can call on in moments of need, partially because he wants to be able to have access to as many people whose knowledge, skills, and abilities fill in the gaps in his own as he can, and partially because he just likes to be the guy who knows a guy. Because he's already got his psionic specialization, he is at least a level 3 character, but I'm going to build him at level 6 because I'm creating this character specifically for a forthcoming series about a city-sized arcane university called the Hierothèque. Psions, like wizards, are intelligence casters with a d6 hit die, proficiency in intelligence and wisdom saving throws and simple weapons, and no armor or shield training. I'm also going to give him proficiency in investigation and medicine, given that he's a healer. He learned 2 cantrips at first level. Minor illusion and telekinetic fling are apparently recommended, but he's going to take prestidigitation and mending instead, because I like the idea that he can fix objects as well as healing creatures. He also has telepathy with a range of 5 feet and subtle telekinesis, which allows him to cast the Mage Hand cantrip without somatic components, making the spectral hand invisible when he does. Like the Psi Warrior Fighter and the Soul Knife Rogue, his psionic powers are represented by psionic energy dice. By 6th level, he has 6 of them, and they are d8s. These dice fuel or enhance certain psion features, and he initially has 2 such features. Telekinetic Propel allows him to use his bonus action to target a large or smaller creature that he can see within 30 feet of himself and force it to make a strength saving throw, either pushing it away from or pulling it toward him up to a number of feet equal to 5 times the number rolled on a failure. This, in addition to the subtle telekinesis ability, essentially amounts to the telekinetic feat without the increased range on the Mage Hand cantrip. And telepathic connection allows him to use his bonus action to roll 1 psionic energy die, increasing the range of his telepathy by a number of feet equal to 10 times the number rolled for a number of minutes equal to his psion level, similar to the Soul Knife Rogue's Psychic Whispers, which lets the Soul Knife telepathically connect with a number of creatures equal to their proficiency bonus for a number of hours equal to the number rolled. At 2nd level, he learned 2 psionic modes that last for 1 minute and can be activated as a bonus action. Attack mode causes his weapon attacks, psion spells, and psion features to ignore resistance to psychic damage, and when he rolls damage for a spell, he can trade 1 psionic energy die in order to re-roll a number of damage dice up to his intelligence modifier. Defense mode grants him resistance to psychic damage and enables him to use his reaction when he fails an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saving throw to roll a psionic energy die and add the number rolled to the saving throw. He also learns 2 psionic disciplines out of 11 possible options. I'm going to give him biofeedback, which allows him to roll a psionic energy die and gain a number of temporary hit points equal to the number rolled plus his intelligence modifier when he casts a psion spell from the necromancy or transmutation school. And I'm also going to give him psionic backlash, which allows him to use his reaction immediately after being hit with an attack roll by a creature he can see to force the attacker to make a wisdom saving throw. On a failure, the attacker takes an amount of psychic damage equal to 2 rolls of the psionic energy die, which is a psionic version of Hellish Rebuke, replacing the dexterity save with a wisdom save and swapping fire damage for psychic damage. At 5th level, he gains Psionic Restoration, which allows him to regain a number of his expended psionic energy dice equal to half his number of psionic energy dice rounded down after finishing a short rest, similar to the Bard's Font of Inspiration, which allows the Bard to regain all expended uses of their bardic inspiration after a short or long rest. At 6th level, he has 10 spells prepared and 10 spell slots, 4 of 1st level, 3 of 2nd level, and 3 of 3rd level. I'm going to give him 5 first-level spells, and those are going to be Comprehend Languages, Identify, Speak with Animals, Featherfall, and Mage Armor. I'm going to give him 2 second-level spells, which will be Invisibility and Locate Object, and I'll give him 2 third-level spells, those being Sending and Summon Astral Entity, which is one of the 2 new leveled spells unique to this class. It's a conjuration spell with a casting time of 1 action, a range of 90 feet, and a required material component of a gem or crystal worth 300 gold or more. The spell calls forth an entity that uses the psionic spirit stat block. It manifests as a crystal entity, an ectoplasmic entity, or a ghostly entity, and it resembles an astral entity of that kind, determining certain details in its stat block. It disappears when reduced to 0 hit points or when the spell ends, which is 1 hour or when the caster loses concentration. The spirit is an ally to the caster and the caster's allies and shares the caster's initiative count in combat, taking its turn immediately after them. It obeys its caster's verbal commands, no action required by the caster, and it takes the dodge action and uses its movement to avoid danger if no commands are issued. As a Psykinetic Psion, he also gets access to a list of spells including Cloud of Daggers, Levitate, Shield, and Thunderwave. Additionally, when he uses his telekinetic propel, he can apply additional effects to his target. He can either boost the target's speed by 10 feet until the start of his next turn. He can disorient the target such that it cannot make opportunity attacks until the start of its next turn, or he can strike it with a telekinetic bolt, inflicting force damage on it equal to the number rolled on the psionic energy die. At 6th level, this character has 1 ability score improvement or feat, but before I decide that, I'm going to determine what his ability scores are by rolling 4d6 and dropping the lowest. First roll is 4, 6, 5, 5 for a 16, which is a very nice way to start. Second is 5, 3, 5, 4 for a 14, which is still pretty nice. Third is 2, 6, 6, 3 for a 15, which is quite nice. Fourth is 6, 1, 4, 6 for another 16, which is very nice again. Fifth is 2, 4, 1, 4 for a 10, which will hopefully be my dump stat. And last is 2, 6, 6, 3 for another 15, which is a nice way to close out this set. He is a Psion, so one of the 16s is going into Intelligence, and the other will go into Dexterity to give him a respectable armor class. One of the 15s is going into Constitution, and I'll put the other 15 in Wisdom to strengthen his psychic backlash. That leaves the 14 and the 10. So I'm going to put the 14 into Charisma to reflect his identity as a leader, and I'll put the 10 into Strength to reflect his background of injury. Then I'm going to double back around and put his +2 origin increase into Intelligence to raise that from a 16 to an 18 and increase his Investigation, Nature, and Religion to +4 and his Arcana, History, and Intelligence saving throws to +6. And then I'll put his +1 origin increase into Constitution to raise that from a 15 to a 16 and increase his hit points from 20 to 23. I'm also going to give him the Gift of the Metallic Dragon feat at 4th level, enabling him to cast the Cure Wounds spell and granting him the ability to use his reaction to manifest protective wings when he or another creature he can see within 5 feet of himself is hit by an attack roll, granting a brief bonus to the target's armor class equal to his proficiency bonus. Next, we get into background, and the PDF suggests that a character who takes the noble or sage background can choose a wild talent feat in place of that background's origin feat. So I'm going to give Ethon the sage background, because having grown up in poverty, he obviously is not a noble. As a sage, he spent years learning the lore of the multiverse, scouring manuscripts, studying scrolls, and listening to the greatest experts on the subjects that interested him. His efforts have made him a master in his fields of study, or at least they will eventually. He gains proficiency in Arcana and History and learns 2 languages. Draconic is the most obvious choice, And I'm going to give him Giant as well, which is also called Jotun, according to Ray Winninger's 1995 second edition supplement, Giant Craft. As part of the Sage background, he also gets the Researcher trait, meaning that when he attempts to learn or recall a piece of lore, he often knows where and from whom he can obtain it. Usually, this information comes from a library, scriptorium, university, or a sage or other learned person or creature, and this aligns perfectly with his nature as a social collector who's been building a network of other specialists whose knowledge, skills, and abilities fill in the gaps in his own, as well as someone who works for an arcane institution like the Hierothèque. I can also roll a d8 on the specialty table to determine the nature of his scholarly training, so that's going to be 6, which is a researcher. Instead of the Magic Initiate feat, then, I'm going to give him a Wild Talent feat. There are 10 options to choose from, and given his identity as a healer, he's going to take the Biokinesis feat, which allows him to roll an extra d4 when he casts a spell that restores hit points a number of times per long rest. It also gives him the ability to cast Spare the Dying, as well as giving him access to the Healing Word and Arcane Vigor spell, each of which he can cast once per long rest without using a spell slot. He can also cast them using any spell slots he has without verbal or somatic components. Arcane Vigor is a new spell that allows him to use a bonus action to roll 1 or 2 of his own unexpended hit dice and regain a number of hit points equal to the total plus his intelligence modifier. The dice have already determined that Ethon is a Derkomaian, but the 2024 edition of the Player's Handbook stripped away some of the differentiation that had been included in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, so I'm going to use Fizban's version of the Derkomaian because that allows me to choose between chromatic, metallic, or gem ancestry. The gem ancestry in particular synergizes incredibly well with the Psion class. Specifically, the Emerald Dragon ancestry gives this character a breath weapon with a 15-foot cone that inflicts 1d10 of psychic damage on a failed dexterity save. It also grants him permanent resistance to psychic damage, as well as a psionic mind trait, which enables him to send telepathic messages to any creature he can see within 30 feet of himself. He doesn't need to share a language with the creature for it to understand his telepathic messages to it, but it must be able to understand at least one language to be able to comprehend them. At 5th level, he additionally gains the Gem Flight feature, enabling him to use his bonus action once per long rest to manifest spectral wings on his body, which will last for 1 minute and grant him a flying speed equal to his walking speed. This aligns perfectly with the Empowered Attack Mode feature he gains at his 6th level of Psykinetic Psion, which increases his flying speed to 60 feet while his attack mode is active, and allows him to add his Intelligence modifier to the damage of Psion spells. He also gains the Rebounding Field trait, enabling him to spend a psionic energy die when he casts the Shield spell in response to being hit by an attack, in order to launch the force back at the attacker, which makes a dexterity saving throw. On a failure, it takes an amount of force damage equal to 2 rolls of the psionic energy die, and Ethon gains a number of temporary hit points equal to the damage, and on a success, the attacker takes half as much damage only. Finally, we get to equipment. The Psion starting equipment includes a light crossbow, 20 crossbow bolts, a case, a spear, 2 daggers, and a Dungeoneer's pack, which includes a backpack, a crowbar, a hammer, 10 pythons, 10 torches, a tinderbox, 10 days of rations, and a water skin, as well as 50 feet of hempen rope strapped to the side. He's also got the Sage's starting equipment, which includes a bottle of ink, a quill, a small knife, a set of common clothes, and a letter from a dead colleague posing a question he has not been able to answer yet. Just out of curiosity, I am going to roll on the cryptic message table to discover what the nature of that unanswered question might have been. And on a 26 and a 99, it is a question involving friendship and violence, which is exactly the sort of deeply philosophical topic I would expect this Psykinetic Psion to discuss with his friends and colleagues. And because of that, I am going to use the backstory generator mechanics included in Tom Pidgeon's Mythic Variation supplement to learn a little bit more about Ethon. So first I will roll a d100 to reveal the number of backstory events. And that's my lucky number 19. So he's got 2 events. The backstory focus of the first event is 29, which is a new PC character. And the nature of this character is going to be 5, which is animal, and another 19, which is creepy. The identity of this creepy animal is 36, which is a foreigner, and an 88, which is a socialite. And the appearance of this creepy animal is going to be an 86, which is stocky, and a 30, which is extravagant, which is an appropriate appearance for a character that's a socialite, even if they are a bit creepy. A couple of descriptors for this extravagant socialite are 92, which is undead, and a 96, which is weak. And a couple of its abilities are going to be 16, which is cold, and a 29, which is deep power. Well, the first thing that immediately comes to mind is a ghost. So is that the case? Well, on a 22, it is, and it's going to trigger a character creation random event, the focus of which is a 007, which is the designation for MI6 agent James Bond and his successor Nomi, and in this instance is an ambiguous event, which are some of my favorite events, because ambiguity is my fourth favorite kind of tea, behind curiosity, generosity, ingenuity, and creativity, and just ahead of anxiety. So the question is, does this ambiguous event involve an action? On a 51, it does not. So does it involve an object? That is an actual 1, the most exceptional possible yes. So it does. And the nature of this object is 21, which is deactivated, and a 70, which is old. Hang on. Is this old deactivated object the Soul Engine from Miles Orion's story? I'm going to say that's nearly impossible. And on a 96, it absolutely is not. Is this ghost somehow connected to this old deactivated object? That's a 33. So they are, and it's going to add an additional aspect to this event, the focus of which is a 98, which is current context, and the action of which is 95, which is triumph, and a 43, which is illness. So this is either a triumph over illness or the triumph of illness. Is this the event in which Evan learned how to cast healing magic and thereby triumphed over the illness that had plagued his community? I'm going to say that's likely. That's a 71, so it isn't. This is the triumph of illness, as this extravagant socialite succumbed to some sort of injury or wound or disease, but refused to cross the threshold between life and whatever comes after, and remained on the material plane to haunt this old deactivated object. The question is, did they do so because they believed that activating the object would cure their community's illness? That's a 44. So they did, and it's going to add another additional aspect to this event, the focus of which is going to be 66, which is close a thread. Presumably, the thread being closed is this ghost's objective of activating this old deactivated object, and the action that's going to close that thread is going to be 59, which is leave, and an 89, which is technology. So what I think happened here is that whoever this ghost was before they died had been researching the illness plaguing their community. and they discovered this old deactivated object and surmised that it was designed to repel whatever was causing the illness. But because it was deactivated, the illness was spreading unchecked. So they went to work studying the object in order to figure out how to reactivate it. But before they could figure that out, they contracted and succumbed to the illness themselves. At some point later, Ethon found the object and discovered the ghost there haunting it, and Ethon continued the research where his predecessor had left off. Since we're closing the thread, and the action that's closing the thread is leave technology, did Ethon succeed in reactivating the object? On a 38, he did. And did that massively reduce the illness plaguing his community? On a 24, it did. So once the object was reactivated, the ghost was able to cross the threshold between life and whatever comes after, and Ethon returned to the home of the mage to collect and organize their research. And as he did, he came across a note that posed an intriguing question about friendship and violence. And Ethon has carried that note with him since that day, still unable to answer that question. And when he casts Summon Astral Entity, the psionic spirit manifests as a ghostly entity that is essentially a psychic echo of that character, having telepathy with a range of 60 feet and an ephemeral ray that inflicts psychic damage. And because of that, was this character's name Ray? On a 27, it was. The backstory focus of the second event is 47, which is a new PC thread, which will be the general goal that he's still pursuing at the time that I play him in the Hierothèque series. The action of this new PC thread will be 41, which is escape, and a 50, which is normal. So it seems that Ethon's ongoing goal is to break away from the ordinary, but also in a larger sense to reject the conventional wisdom that certain social systems must continue to operate in a particular way simply because they've always operated in that way, and to actively seek out ways to improve those social systems. This was part of the reason that he relocated from his homeland to the Hierothèque. Along with the fact that it's one of the premier institutions of arcane research, it's also located in the country of Zypros, which dismantled its own monarchy almost 300 years before Ethon's time and replaced it with a democratic sovereignty. This also indicates to me that the name of the city that Ethon grew up in was Samanaya, which is a Sanskrit word that means normal. And so this is going to complete the character sheet of the Psykinetic Psion, Ethon Sharma.